Hello everybody, my name is Gita Marie and I talk about how individuals can navigate what's being said and done about environmentalism, sustainability, climate change. I'm talking about greenwashing, I'm talking about overconsumption, I'm talking about what we as individuals can do as well as what can be done structurally, industrially, politically. Okay, today's video is a tiny bit different though. However, it all still ties together, so just hang on with me. I'm sure that you have also noticed that there is a certain rise in conservative agendas, conservative values, traditionalism happening in real life as well as on social media. I have noticed it quite a few times and frankly, it's interesting. Overall, I think it's pretty safe to say that when we see a world destabilized, when we see uncertainty and lack of control and a lot of change happening in the world, what people tend to do is that they cling to things that they understand and they can control. This is one of the reasons why we are seeing so many people adapt more conservative ways of life or finding those ways of life more interesting than they did before. If anything, it's due to the uncertainty that happens out there. So we grab onto those things that we know we understand and we can control. Those uncertainties can be climate related because our world and the ecosystems in our world are shifting and changing. It can be geopolitical as well as related to warfare. And when we look at that, all of these things coincidentally are something that we are all facing and having to navigate in today's society. I saw someone from the New York Times comparing this day and age to what happened in the 1930s. What happened in 2008 in many ways resembles what happened in the 30s, or in the beginning of the 30s. Once again, going down the same path of traditionalism, conservative agendas, and what they then evolve into. But that's not necessarily what today's video is about. It is an aspect of it because it's impossible to ignore that this is something that's happening. If we talk about what happens on this channel, I try to be very conscious with what kind of agendas that I am also promoting. Because whether we like it or not, the kind of media and content we are exposed to voluntarily or by having it be promoted to us affects us in certain ways. In the video I did not very long ago, I talked about 30 different things that we can do during autumn time instead of over-consuming, which overall just, that video in and of itself is fine because just a way of sharing like more so practical things that we can do, hobbies we can take up instead of going out and just buying shit we don't need, right? So that part is good. What I became almost self-conscious about after posting it was that how so many of the things that I talked about in that video were related to traditionally womanly activities and hobbies. Activities and hobbies that were more so related to women staying at home. It was very so mending clothing, baking, making your own stuff, that kind of thing. And overall, that part of sustainability absolutely has to exist here. We don't have to reinvent the wheel, but many of the things that are sustainable and that exist in a sustainable lifestyle has to do with making more things from scratch, repairing our stuff when it breaks. But I got to think, if the only way we promote or explain or show sustainability has to do with these kinds of chores and tasks, does that come with a downside? There's no way around that there is a massive responsibility on those who communicate and show and visualize sustainability, that we not only talk about the more so practical mending, repairing, baking, prepping, making food at home, making food from scratch, all things and crafts and skills that are incredibly fantastic to have and master. But it's also important to talk about the fact that sustainability is also technology and innovation. It's also science and field studies. It is all of these things as well. And what clicks for you and what clicks for me and what clicks for other people are going to be different. But we need people that are invested and passionate about environmentalism, about saving biodiversity, and about bringing global temperatures down. We need those people in all different fields. Okay, that made me think of one of the first podcasts I was in back in 2016, so like ages ago, 9 years ago, right? Almost 10. That was in the very early beginning of the zero waste lifestyle. So, you know, obviously it was a lot about making stuff from scratch, having a little trash jar. It was that whole experience. You remember, if you were there, if you were here on my platform, you remember how I sort of try to practice and live this lifestyle. And the host asks me if there is an inherent problem with things in sustainability requiring so much time and labor. Does that exclude a lot of people from sustainability or from the zero waste movement, from any kind of, eco-conscious living? You have to stay at home to be able to do these things. Or are you able to maintain this sustainable lifestyle even in a high-paced job and a career? And I think that is a really good question. Time is by far one of our most precious currencies. So things taking time often becomes a downside to even doing them. Now, sustainability isn't only housework. It isn't only doing things from scratch. It isn't just baking or cooking or mending your clothing. It isn't just doing all this stuff. I like to cook and bake and mend my clothing because I find great pleasure in it. Whenever me and my partner watch a movie, we sometimes have these small little things that we like to sit and make. Either that being visible mending, I have my spoon project where I'm carving my own spoon. We have things that we do instead of just spending dead time on our phones. But that is not all sustainability is. Most of all, sustainability from any kind of perspective has to do with minimizing the amount of fossil fuels that we burn. Right, so that is a main priority. It has a lot to do with the stuff that we buy, how we transport ourselves, how we fuel and heat and energize our homes. It has to do with what kind of food we put on our plates. In the environmentalist movement, a focus on resources and how we use resources is kind of inevitable. In a good way, I would say. So I take great pleasure in mending my clothes. I think it's really fun way of exercising mindfulness. I love to cook. I've made a cookbook about plant-based, vegan, gourmet fine dining. I absolutely love it. I'm not a very good baker, but I really try my very best. But that is not the only way to be sustainable. And I fear that if we don't talk about these things, if we don't say these things out loud, we push the same agenda as a lot of these more sort of conservative platforms, conservative talking points. If we have this sort of one-dimensional idea of what sustainability is, it's sort of implied or required that someone has the time to do this labor. And statistically speaking, those people in history as well as now are women. Is that also one of the reasons why when we look at the people that are engaged in sustainable lifestyles and that actually practice sustainability from a consumer individual standpoint, it tends to also mostly be women? Yes, it's called the eco-gender gap, which say that women overall tend to be much more likely to pick up sustainable habits than men. There are many reasons for this, and I've made a whole video about that, so I would link that down below so you can go and find out more. But one of the things that might also be at play here is the fact that women are more likely or more willing to spend that time learning these crafts, doing the labor. They prioritize it, or they are already in positions where they are more at home and then they prioritize it, and then that becomes sustainability. It is not all sustainability is. I don't know how many times I will say that in this video, but it's just really important that we have this conversation, right? So a lot of women are on social media currently talking about or romanticizing a more so vintage aesthetic with more traditional gender roles where women stay at home. They don't talk about education, they don't talk about work, they are stay-at-home wives, which if you want to do that, I would preface this by saying is perfectly fine. That is the whole point of feminism. It is the choice to choose what feels right to you. But just because you want to stay at home, take care of your home, take care of your kids, you are completely free to do that. But that doesn't mean that that is fulfilling for every woman out there. Okay, wild that we have to even discuss this. But first of all, you do you. But to me, it's kind of fascinating that we're seeing this sort of shift in what makes people tick. Like, there are so many social media influencers, women primarily, that are talking about how fulfilling it is to be stay-at-home wives, stay-at-home moms, romanticizing that kind of life. And some go even further into trying to discredit science and like well-established knowledge. Some of these influencers are definitely giving people advice on things that they are in no way, shape or form qualified to talk about. Like what is safe for children to consume based on vibes. We have the studies, we have the science, we have the knowledge. Anyway, one of the things that I think is really interesting that I've seen a lot on social media, especially so on TikTok recently, has been videos of women that do baking, fold laundry, make some food, like exist in the home, in the kitchen specifically, and then the text says something in the sort of, imagine how much propaganda it took to make women think this was oppression. So the thing is, I cannot actually express how silly I think it is that you take on the traditional gender roles of the 50s or even before then and you romanticize it like it's a vintage aesthetic, and you completely gloss over the fact that women didn't have a choice. You couldn't open your own bank account. Through the vast majority of history, women couldn't wear trousers. You couldn't purchase something without your husband or your father's approval, and it was just expected of you, based on your gender alone, that you would be thrilled staying at home, cooking, cleaning, and taking care of your kids. And that was your sole purpose. And no one asked you ever what you wanted to do. No one took your feelings or your pain seriously. No one took your illnesses seriously. So yes, even if it feels fun and a great way to spend your time baking, if it's the only thing you're allowed to do, that is still oppression. And I think it's interesting that we are seeing this massive wave of conservative traditionalist talking points that are sort of trying to romanticize the time back then, because we are scared of what's happening today, and it feels cozy to look back at another time where things were simpler, even though for most people it wasn't. Might have been great if you were white and ideally a man. This leads me to my final point, which is that we have to be really vigilant and aware of these movements and these talking points being so popular. Because what a lot of these conservative influencers are selling is a narrative where you become healthier, you become less worried, you become happier if you just lean back into those gender roles, if you lean into that purpose of women. And these women do that with the freedom of their own social media account, making money that probably go into their own bank account, sitting in their house that they probably own. And then they tell women that they don't need feminism. Interesting. Interesting, I just say. I think a lot of people got it really twisted what feminism means, what historically feminism has actually done for women, giving us rights, wages, education, increased safety. We still have a lot of work to do, clearly. But imagine if we didn't have any of these things. In my grandparents' and parents' lifetimes, it has been legal to assault your wife. Tell me how that time was better? Being a conservative, Christian, traditionalist influencer is incredibly lucrative, which means that these women make money off of saying these things, right? They make that money. You could say it's a job, right? Because it is. And then they tell women that they shouldn't have jobs or they shouldn't have education, meanwhile being in a position themselves with the freedom to leave the current situation that they are in if it no longer suits them, or if they no longer agree or feel aligned with that life. It actually bothers me so greatly. Like Erica Kirk, Ballerina Farm. There are tons of these that are saying you should be more traditional, embrace your purpose, you should stay at home, don't get an education, don't get a job because your job is at home. But they have the financial freedom to do whatever they want. And then they tell women to give that up themselves. That is so fucking despicable, excuse me. That's not a girl's girl. Needless to say, if you don't want those things, like if you don't want education, or if you don't want a career, if you want something different, you are allowed to do that. You are allowed to not want those things, because it's not for everybody. And you can have fulfilling lives without fitting into that box. I know several people that have perfectly happy, fulfilled lives without doing those things. Tons of things in my life have been expected of me, and I chose to do different things. Like, what you choose to do with your own life is completely up to you. My main problem is you making money on doing your own thing, telling women that they can't do the same. That is not just you expressing yourself, that is directly harmful to other people. The world is still changing and it is still scary, and we still need to find that sense of control, and one of the best ways of doing that is by looking to a time where we thought everything was in order. Coincidentally, that just happened to be a period of time where the vast majority of the world's population didn't have a voice for themselves. Conveniently. No, so needless to say, I don't think I'm actually scared of becoming a tradwife. Don't have a problem with people that choose to go down that path. I have a problem with that seeming to be a bigger and bigger default setting. It seems to be a bigger narrative. We're seeing more and more discussions, both in the political landscape as well as culturally, what women and men are good at, and how women just naturally, biologically are good at these things. And that is just complete bollocks, by the way. It's that sort of regression in the way that we view other people, that we have this sort of expectation that we can fit everyone in this box and it's just all gonna be great. And if we fit people into these boxes, we are gonna feel happy and secure inside. which we are not, by the way, because it has nothing to do with the box. But obviously I'm not going to go down that path because I am simply too foul-mouthed, too annoying, and too frighteningly stubborn to go down that path. I am a difficult woman, and I will keep being a difficult woman for the rest of my life. My partner can attest to it. But I want to be conscious of not talking about promoting visualizing, showing the one-dimensional parts of sustainability that has to do with housework. Once again, sustainability is about so much more. There's so much we can do here, and in many ways I also think it's the most practical, small, tiny things, changes and habits that can click for people, or that can feel inspiring, where you feel like you finally have a say, you have something that you can do that can make a difference. It's not just talk and reports and debates, it's finally action. And I think in many ways that is why it feels so natural to talk about mending and cooking and baking and things that we do in our homes, because those are concrete actions, but there are so many other types of actions that we can take. And I think we should talk about those as well. Let me know what you think down below, because I would love to hear your thoughts on this. And is there anything other than the stuff that I've talked about here that you want to see discussed, or that you want to see represented on this channel? Because I'm definitely all ears, so let's talk about it. Thank you so much for watching. Have an amazing day, and I will see you guys next time. Take really good care of yourselves. Until then, bye.